Laura stood outside the glass doors of the dojo, staring at her reflection. Her short brown hair was tucked neatly behind her ears, and she adjusted the collar of her brand-new white GI one last time. It felt strange to wear something so different from her usual jeans and t-shirts. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air smelled like sweat and polish, a mix that somehow made her feel both nervous and excited. The room was bigger than she expected, with high ceilings and large windows that let in warm afternoon sunlight. Blue mats covered most of the floor, and along the walls were shelves stacked with training gear and framed certificates. Posters with motivational quotes hung between them. Discipline over desire and strength comes from within. A group of people were already there, moving fluidly across the mats. Some practiced throwing each other down while others worked on intricate holds and submissions. Laura watched them silently, trying to memorize their movements. They all seemed so confident, so sure of themselves. She wondered if she would ever look like that. "Hey," a voice called out, breaking her thoughts. She turned to see a man walking toward her. He looked about 30, tall and muscular, with spiky black hair and a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. His own GI had patches sewn onto it, marking him as someone important here, a teacher maybe, or just really good at what he did. "You must be new," he said, stopping a few feet away. His tone wasn't unfriendly, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. "Yeah," Laura replied, clutching her sports bag tighter. "I'm Laura." "Jake," he said, nodding once. Then, without waiting for her to respond, he added, "First day?" She nodded. "Yeah, I've never done this before." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Never? What made you decide to try Jiu Jitsu?" "I wanted to get stronger," she admitted, feeling heat rise in her cheeks, "and maybe learn how to defend myself." He chuckled, though it wasn't a kind sound. "Well, you came to the right place, if you're serious about it." Before she could answer, another voice cut through the air. "Jake, stop scaring the newbie." A woman approached them, shorter than Jake but radiating energy. Her dark ponytail swung as she walked, and her friendly smile put Laura at ease immediately. "Ignore him," the woman said, turning to Laura. "He likes to act tough, but he's harmless. I'm Claire, by the way." "Laura," she said again, grateful for the interruption. Claire gave her a quick once-over. "First-timer, huh? Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Come on, let's get you warmed up." As they walked toward the mats, Jake lingered for a moment, watching them go. Something about Laura unsettled him, not because she looked particularly strong or skilled, but because of the quiet determination in her eyes. Most beginners came in loud and eager, only to quit after a week. This one seemed different. On the mats, Claire introduced Laura to the basic warm-up routine. Stretches, rolls, and simple drills designed to loosen muscles and prepare the body for more intense activity. Laura followed along carefully, mimicking the movements of those around her. At first, she struggled to keep up, stumbling awkwardly during forward rolls and landing harder than intended. But she didn't give up. Each time she fell, she got back up, brushing herself off and trying again. Jake watched from the sidelines, arms crossed over his chest. Beside him, two other students whispered and laughed under their breath. "Look at her," one of them said, tilting his head toward Laura. "She can barely roll without falling flat on her face." Jake snorted. "Told you she wouldn't last long." People like her always think martial arts will be easy, like some self-help miracle cure. They don't realize how much work it takes. His friend grinned. "Bet she quits after today." "Don't count on it," Jake muttered, though he didn't explain why. There was something about Laura's persistence that intrigued him. Still, he couldn't resist joining in when the others started making jokes about her clumsy attempts. By the time warm-ups ended, Laura was sweating and breathing heavily, but she felt proud of herself for sticking it out. Claire clapped her, hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone," she announced. "Pair up for partner drills. Focus on control and technique. No ego, no rushing." Laura hesitated, unsure who to approach. Before she could decide, Jake strode over, still smirking. "How about we pair up?" he suggested, though it sounded more like a command. Claire shot him a warning glance. "Be nice, Jake." He shrugged innocently. I'm always nice. Reluctantly, Laura nodded. Sure, she said softly. They moved to an empty spot on the mat, and Jake began demonstrating a basic guard position. This is your foundation, he explained. If you can't hold your ground here, everything else falls apart. Laura listened attentively, positioning herself as instructed. But when Jake tried to demonstrate a sweep, she flinched, unprepared for the sudden movement. He sighed dramatically. You're too stiff, he criticized. Relax your arms. You're supposed to flow, not fight against me. She nodded and tried again, but her form remained awkward. Jake shook his head, clearly growing impatient. This isn't going to work, he muttered loud enough for nearby students to hear. You need to commit, if you're even serious about this. Heat flooded Laura's face, and she glanced down at the mat, wishing she could disappear. A few people snickered, and Jake's friends exchanged knowing looks. Just forget it, Jake said finally, stepping back. Maybe jiu-jitsu isn't for you. For a moment, Laura considered walking away. She could feel the weight of everyone's stares, the silent judgment pressing down on her. But then she remembered why she'd come here in the first place, to prove to herself that she could do hard things, to show that she wasn't weak. Without saying a word, she straightened up and met Jake's gaze. I want to keep trying, she said firmly. Jake blinked, caught off guard by her unexpected defiance. For a second, his smirk faltered, replaced by something unreadable. Then he shrugged again, pretending not to care. Fine, he said, but don't say I didn't warn you. As they resumed practice, Laura focused harder than ever, determined to improve despite the ridicule. She didn't know it yet, but this small victory, the decision to stay, was just the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. After leaving the dojo that evening, Laura felt defeated. Jake's words echoed in her mind. Maybe jiu-jitsu isn't for you. She replayed every clumsy move, every mistake she had made during practice. By the time she got home, doubt had taken root in her chest, whispering that maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. But then something unexpected happened. As she scrolled through social media to distract herself, an ad popped up for a local MMA gym. It wasn't flashy or glamorous like some of the other promotions she'd seen before. Instead, it promised personalized training tailored to individual goals. At the bottom of the ad, there was a note. No experience required. Curiosity got the better of her, and she clicked on the link. A few minutes later, she found herself dialing the number listed on the website. When a woman answered, introducing herself as Mia, Laura hesitated. What if this was just another waste of time? But Mia's calm voice reassured her, and within half an hour they agreed to meet at the gym the next morning. The next day, Laura arrived at the address Mia had given her. It wasn't fancy, a converted warehouse tucked away in an industrial part of town, but it had character. Concrete walls, exposed pipes running along the ceiling, and faded posters of fighters covered the space. The air smelled faintly of rubber and cleaning supplies, but it felt alive somehow, buzzing with energy. Mia greeted her warmly. She was in her mid-30s with sharp features softened by a kind smile. Her shoulder-length blonde hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and she wore black athletic gear that highlighted her toned physique. Something about her presence commanded respect without being intimidating. You must be Laura, Mia said, shaking her hand firmly. I'm glad you came. Thanks for meeting me, Laura replied, still unsure whether she'd made the right decision. I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. That's okay, Mia interrupted gently. Let's start with the basics. Tell me why you want to train. Laura hesitated, then shrugged. I guess I want to get stronger, not just physically but mentally too, and I don't know. I feel like I need to prove something to myself. Mia nodded thoughtfully. Good answer. Everyone starts somewhere, Laura. You're already ahead because you showed up. They moved to the mats where Mia began teaching her fundamental techniques. Unlike Jake, who seemed more interested in showing off than helping, Mia broke each movement down step by step, explaining the purpose behind every detail. Laura soaked it all in, grateful for the patience and clarity Mia offered. Over the following weeks, Laura returned to the gym almost every night after work. Each session pushed her further, challenging her limits both physically and mentally. Slowly but surely, she began to see improvements. Her rolls became smoother, her transitions sharper. For the first time, she started to believe that maybe she could actually do this. One evening, after a particularly grueling sparring session, Mia approached her with a thoughtful expression. "You've been working hard," she said, "and I think you're ready for something bigger." "What do you mean?" Laura asked warily. Mia gestured toward a small table near the corner of the room. On it sat a sleek metallic device, no larger than a matchbox, glowing faintly with blue lights. Laura frowned, unsure what to make of it. "This," Mia explained, picking it up carefully, "is a prototype neural implant designed to enhance reflexes and spatial awareness. It's experimental, but it could take your training to the next level." Laura stared at the device, feeling a mix of awe and apprehension. "Isn't that dangerous?" "It's safe," Mia assured her. "It's been tested extensively and I've used it myself. But it's not mandatory, it's entirely up to you. If you decide to try it, we'll monitor your progress closely." For a moment, Laura didn't respond. The idea of using technology to augment her abilities felt strange, almost unnatural. Yet deep down, she knew she wanted to keep improving. This might be the edge she needed to silence the doubts, not just from others, but from herself. "Okay," she said finally, "let's do it." The process was simpler than she expected. Mia attached the implant to the base of Laura's skull using a specialized adhesive patch. At first, nothing seemed different. But as the days went on, Laura noticed subtle changes. Her reactions became faster, almost instinctive. During drills, she found herself anticipating Mia's movements before they even happened. Even outside the gym, everyday tasks felt easier, as if her brain were operating on a higher frequency. Despite these advancements, Mia emphasized the importance of balance. "Technology can give you an advantage," she warned, "but it's not a substitute for skill or discipline. Don't rely on it too much." Laura took those words to heart, continuing to push herself physically and mentally. With Mia's guidance, she learned advanced techniques that blended traditional Jiu Jitsu with elements of modern combat theory. They practiced unconventional strategies designed to exploit opponents' blind spots, turning weaknesses into strengths. As her confidence grew, so did her determination. Laura stopped thinking about Jake and the mockery she'd faced at the dojo. Instead, she focused on her own journey, visualizing how far she'd come and how much farther she could go. One night, after an especially intense session, Mia handed her a bottle of water and smiled. "You're ready," she said simply. "For what?" Laura asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "To face him again," Mia replied. "If you choose to." Laura froze, the weight of Mia's words sinking in. Returning to the dojo meant confronting not only Jake but also the doubts she'd carried with her since that first humiliating day. Could she handle it? "I'm not sure," she admitted quietly. "That's normal," Mia said. "Fear is part of growth. But remember, you're not the same person you were when you started. Trust yourself." With Mia's encouragement ringing in her ears, Laura resolved to return to the dojo, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to show herself that she belonged there. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd face it head-on, armed with everything she'd learned. Little did she know, her decision would set the stage for something extraordinary, a challenge that would test not only her newfound skills, but also her resilience and courage. Laura hadn't planned on returning to the dojo so soon. After weeks of intense training with Mia, she felt stronger, not just physically but mentally too. Still, stepping back into that familiar space brought back memories she'd rather forget. The mocking laughter, the condescending stares, and most of all, Jake's cutting words. But she reminded herself why she was here, to face her fears head-on and prove to herself that she could hold her ground. When she walked through the glass doors that evening, The room fell quiet for a moment before resuming its usual hum of activity. Some students glanced at her curiously, while others ignored her completely. Claire noticed her right away and gave her a small wave, smiling encouragingly. Laura returned the gesture, feeling a flicker of gratitude for the one friendly face. In the room, Jake was already on the mats, surrounded by a group of admirers who hung on his every word. He looked exactly as Laura remembered, confident, cocky, and larger than life. His GI was pristine, adorned with patches that marked him as someone important. When he caught sight of her, his smirk widened. "Well, well," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Look who decided to crawl back." Laura clenched her fists briefly before forcing herself to relax. She had promised herself not to let his taunts get to her this time. Instead, she walked over calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Hi, Jake," she said evenly. "Mind if I join warm-ups?" His grin faltered slightly, surprised by her composure, but he quickly recovered. "Sure, knock yourself out, just don't trip over your own feet again." A few people chuckled nervously, though Laura noticed that Claire shot Jake a disapproving glare. Ignoring the comment, Laura moved to the edge of the mat and began stretching alongside the others. She focused on her breathing, tuning out the whispers and letting the tension melt away. Warm-ups passed quickly, and soon Claire called everyone together for partner drills. As pairs formed around the room, Jake lingered near Laura, watching her closely. Finally, he stepped forward, crossing his arms over his chest. "How about we pair up?" he suggested, though it sounded more like a challenge. Laura hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Fine by me." The other students exchanged glances, sensing the brewing tension. Even Claire looked uneasy as she watched them take their positions on the mat. Jake wasted no time showing off, demonstrating basic techniques with exaggerated flair. Laura followed along patiently, mimicking his movements with precision that surprised even herself. But Jake wasn't satisfied. After a few minutes, he stopped, abruptly, and shook his head. "You're still too stiff," he said, his tone laced with mockery. "If you can't keep up, maybe you should stick to yoga or something." Laura didn't respond immediately. She took a deep breath, letting his words wash over her without sinking in. Then, in a calm voice, she replied, "Why don't you show me how it's done? Or are you scared to actually spar?" The room went silent. Jake blinked, clearly caught off guard by her boldness. For a moment he stared at her, searching for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, he smirked again, though this time it lacked its usual arrogance. "You really want to go there?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Laura said firmly. "I'm here to learn, not listen to insults." Jake glanced around the room where everyone had stopped what they were doing to watch. He couldn't back down now, not with an audience waiting for him to act. With a shrug, he stepped onto the mat, gesturing for her to follow. "All right," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "But don't say I didn't warn you." They squared off, circling each other cautiously. Jake's stance was wide and aggressive, designed to intimidate. Laura mirrored his posture, keeping her movements fluid and controlled. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but she pushed the distraction aside, focusing solely on Jake. Claire stepped forward, raising a hand. "Remember, this is just practice. No egos, okay?" Jake nodded absently, never taking his eyes off Laura. "Sure thing." As soon as Claire signaled the start, Jake lunged forward, aiming to grab Laura's collar and throw her off balance. But instead of resisting, Laura sidestepped smoothly, using his momentum against him. Before he could recover, she swept her leg behind his knee, sending him stumbling backward. The crowd gasped audibly. Jake caught himself just in time, glaring at her with newfound intensity. "Lucky move," he muttered, regaining his footing. But Laura wasn't finished. She pressed her advantage, chaining together a series of quick, calculated strikes. Each movement flowed seamlessly into the next, guided by instincts honed during countless hours of training with Mia. Jake struggled to keep up, his usual dominance, slipping away as Laura countered every attempt to overpower her. Finally, after nearly a minute of relentless pressure, Jake raised a hand to signal a pause. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he stepped back, breathing heavily. Okay, he said, holding up both hands. You've made your point. Laura exhaled slowly, lowering her guard. Her heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral, refusing to gloat. Around them, the other students murmured among themselves, some impressed, others skeptical. Not bad, Jake admitted, grudging tackled. The moment Jake admitted that Laura had made her point, the room seemed to hold its breath. No one expected this quiet, unassuming woman to stand toe-to-toe with the dojo's most arrogant black belt, let alone push him to back down. But before anyone could react, Jake straightened up, brushing off his GI as if nothing unusual had happened. All right, he said, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's see what you've really got. Laura hesitated for a split second, unsure whether she should press further. She hadn't come here looking for a fight. All she wanted was to prove to herself that she could handle whatever came her way. But something about Jake's tone, a mix of arrogance and frustration, sparked a fire inside her. If he wasn't going to take her seriously, then she'd make sure he did. Fine, she replied evenly, stepping back into position. But don't say I didn't warn you. Claire, standing nearby, looked uneasy. Guys, remember this is just practice. No hard feelings, okay? Jake waved her off without looking away from Laura. Relax, Claire, it's fine. With a nod from Claire, the match resumed. This time Jake came at her harder, faster. He tried to overpower her with brute force, grabbing her collar and attempting to throw her down. But Laura anticipated his move. Using her enhanced reflexes, the result of weeks of training in the neural implant, she twisted out of his grip effortlessly, redirecting his momentum into a sweep. Jake stumbled but managed to stay upright, gritting his teeth. Clever, he muttered under his breath. But not clever enough. He switched tactics, aiming low to catch her off guard. Dropping to one knee, he lunged forward, trying to lock her leg in a submission hold. Laura reacted instantly, shifting her weight and spinning around to counter. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctive, guided by the countless drills she'd practiced with Mia. Within seconds, she had Jake trapped in a tight triangle choke. For a moment, Jake froze, stunned by how quickly the tables had turned. Then, realizing he couldn't escape, he tapped the mat sharply twice. Okay, he gasped, pulling himself free as soon as Laura released him. The room erupted into whispers. Students who had laughed at her during warm-ups now stared in disbelief. Even Claire, usually so composed, looked speechless. Laura stood calmly, catching her breath and waiting for Jake to say something. Jake climbed to his feet slowly, rubbing his neck where the choke had tightened. For once, his usual smirk was gone, replaced by an unreadable expression. He glanced around the room, meeting the wide-eyed stares of his classmates before turning back to Laura. Not bad, he said finally, his voice quieter than before. I'll give you that. Laura nodded politely but didn't respond. She knew better than to rub it in, especially since she hadn't intended to embarrass him. All she cared about was proving to herself that she belonged here, that she could rise above the ridicule and doubt. As the initial shock wore off, the room began buzzing with conversation. Some students congratulated Laura, impressed by her skill. Others whispered among themselves, speculating about how she'd improved so drastically in such a short time. A few even accused her of cheating, though no one dared say it to her face. Jake, meanwhile, retreated to the edge of the mat, clearly shaken. He sat cross-legged, staring at the floor as if replaying the match in his mind. Every so often he glanced up at Laura, his expression torn between admiration and resentment. After a few minutes, Claire clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. All right, people, let's get back to work. There's plenty more to practice. Tonight. The students reluctantly returned to their drills, though it was clear their focus was elsewhere. Laura paired up with another beginner for the rest of the session, practicing basic techniques and helping her partner improve. Despite the earlier drama, she felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. When class ended, Laura gathered her things and prepared to leave. As she walked toward the door, Jake appeared in front of her, blocking her path. His posture was relaxed, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Wait," he said, holding up a hand. "Can we talk for a minute?" Laura paused, surprised by his tone. "Sure." They stepped aside, away from the crowd of students leaving the dojo. Jake ran a hand through his spiky hair, looking unusually uncertain. "Look," he began, glancing at the floor. "I might have been wrong about you." It was the last thing Laura expected him to say. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I mean..." He sighed, struggling to find the right words. "You came in here as a total beginner, and I gave you a hard time because I thought you wouldn't last, but you proved me wrong tonight. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, sorry." Laura blinked, taken aback by his apology. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Finally, she nodded. "Thanks," she said simply. "That means a lot." Jake offered a small smile, though it still lacked his usual confidence. "Don't get used to beating me, though," he joked half-heartedly. "Next time I won't go easy on you." Laura chuckled softly. "We'll see about that." With that, they parted ways, each heading home to process the night's events. For Laura, the victory wasn't about proving Jake wrong. It was about proving something to herself. She had faced her fears, silenced the doubters, and emerged stronger than ever. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Little did she realize, however, that her performance that evening would attract attention far beyond the walls of the dojo. Unbeknownst to her, someone had been watching closely, someone whose interest in her newfound abilities would change everything. The next few days passed quickly for Laura. Life returned to its usual rhythm, work during the day, training at Mia's gym in the evenings, and occasional visits to the dojo where she continued to practice with renewed confidence. Word of her match against Jake had spread among the students, earning her a mix of respect and curiosity. Some treated her differently now, more like an equal than a beginner, while others kept their distance, unsure what to make of her sudden improvement. But just as things began to settle, something unexpected happened. One evening after leaving the dojo, Laura found a message waiting for her on her phone. It was an email from someone named Mr. Carter, claiming to represent Novatech, a leading technology company specializing in advanced neural implants. The subject line read, "An opportunity awaits." Laura opened the email cautiously, scanning the contents. Mr. Carter explained that they had been monitoring recent developments in experimental combat training programs and were impressed by her performance. He mentioned the neural implant prototype she'd used under Mia's guidance, hinting that it was originally developed by Novatech for military applications. They wanted to meet with her to discuss potential opportunities within their experimental combat division. At first, Laura thought it was a prank or some kind of scam. Why would a major tech company be interested in her? She wasn't famous or extraordinary, just someone trying to get stronger. But when she called the number provided in the email, a real person answered, a polite assistant who confirmed the meeting request and offered to arrange a time convenient for her. Curiosity got the better of her, and 2 days later she found herself sitting in a high-rise office overlooking the city. Mr. Carter greeted her warmly, shaking her hand firmly before inviting her to sit down. He was in his 40s, dressed in a sharp suit, with neatly styled gray hair and an air of professionalism that made Laura feel slightly out of place in her casual clothes. "Thank you for coming, Miss Laura," he began, gesturing toward the holographic displays scattered across his desk. "I trust you've heard of Novatech?" She nodded. "Yes, I've seen your ads online. Neural implants, right?" "That's correct," Mr. Carter replied, smiling. "We specialize in cutting-edge technology designed to enhance human capabilities, and let me say your recent progress has caught our attention." Laura frowned, leaning forward slightly. "My progress?" Mr. Carter tapped a button on his desk, activating a large screen behind him. On it appeared footage of her sparring with Jake in the dojo, the same match that had left everyone speechless. Watching herself move with precision and speed felt surreal, almost like seeing a stranger. "This is why we're here," Mr. Carter continued. Your use of the neural implant prototype has exceeded all expectations. Not only have you adapted to it seamlessly, but you've also demonstrated remarkable skill and discipline. We believe you could play a key role in refining this technology further. Laura stared at him, stunned. You want me to? What exactly? We'd like you to join our experimental combat division, he explained. As part of the program, you'll receive access to the latest advancements in neural augmentation, along with personalized training tailored to maximize your potential. In return, you'll help us test and improve these systems for future applications. For a moment, Laura didn't know how to respond. The offer sounded incredible, a chance to push her limits even further, to become stronger and faster than she ever imagined. But it also came with complications. What about her life outside the program, her job, her friends? I don't know, she admitted finally. This is a lot to take in. Mr. Carter nodded understandingly. Of course, this isn't a decision to rush into. Take your time to think it over. All I ask is that you consider the possibilities, not just for yourself but for the future of martial arts and combat sports. After the meeting ended, Laura walked back to her car feeling overwhelmed. The idea of joining Novatech excited her, but it also scared her. Was she ready for something so big? Would accepting mean abandoning everything else she cared about? When she arrived home, she called Mia, needing advice. After explaining the situation, Mia listened quietly before responding. This is a huge opportunity, Laura, Mia said thoughtfully. But remember why you started this journey. To prove something to yourself, not to chase fame or power. If Novatech aligns with your goals, then go for it. But if it doesn't feel right, don't force it. Her words stayed with Laura as she lay awake that night, replaying the conversation in her mind. By morning, she still hadn't reached a decision. Meanwhile, tensions at the dojo grew worse. News of Laura's meeting with Novatech spread quickly, thanks to Jake, who couldn't resist sharing the gossip. Some students sided with him, accusing her of using cheat tech to win matches. Others defended her, pointing out that skill and determination mattered more than equipment. Jake himself struggled to process his emotions. On one hand, he admired Laura's talent and resilience. On the other, he resented the attention she was getting. During practice, he lashed out at her again, accusing her of being dishonest. You think you're special because some fancy gadget makes you faster? He snapped during a break. That's not real strength. Laura sighed, tired of the argument. It's not about the implant, Jake. You saw me fight. I earned every bit of that win. Did you? He shot back, though his voice lacked conviction. Deep down, he knew she was right, but admitting it meant confronting his own insecurities. Their heated exchange created a rift among the students, dividing them into factions. Claire tried to mediate, reminding everyone that Jiu Jitsu was supposed to bring people together, not tear them apart. But her efforts only went so far. The dojo's once friendly atmosphere became strained, filled with tension and mistrust. Amidst the chaos, Laura realized something important. She didn't need Novatech or anyone else's validation to define her worth. Her journey wasn't about proving herself to others. It was about staying true to her values. With that clarity, she made her decision. The next day, she sent an email to Mr. Carter, politely declining his offer. In it, she thanked him for the opportunity, but explained that her focus remained on personal growth rather than professional advancement. To her surprise, he responded with respect, wishing her luck and encouraging her to reach out if she changed her mind. Back at the dojo, Laura continued mentoring beginners, teaching them the lessons she'd learned along the way. Slowly but surely, the rift began to heal. Even Jake softened, apologizing for his behavior and acknowledging her hard work. Though challenges remained, Laura faced them with the same quiet determination that had brought her this far. Little did she know, however, that her choice would inspire those around her, including someone who would carry her story forward in ways she never anticipated. Laura's decision to decline Novatech's offer marked a turning point, not just for her but for everyone at the dojo. By choosing to stay grounded and focus on what truly mattered, she became an example of humility and perseverance. Her presence inspired those around her, especially the newer students who had once felt as out of place as she did when she first started. Every day after work, Laura returned to the dojo, dedicating herself not only to improving her skills, but also to helping others grow. She began mentoring beginners, patiently guiding them through basic techniques and sharing stories from her own journey. When they struggled or doubted themselves, she reminded them of the same lessons Mia had taught her. Progress takes time, effort, and belief in oneself. One evening, while working with a shy teenage girl named Sophie, Laura noticed how much fear held her back. Sophie hesitated before every move, afraid of making mistakes or looking foolish in front of the more experienced students. Laura knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to mess up," Laura said gently. "That's how we learn. Trust me, I've fallen more times than I can count." Sophie glanced up, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "But what if I'm not good enough?" Laura smiled. "None of us are when we start. The important thing is to keep going. Even when it feels hard, you'll surprise yourself." Her words struck a chord with Sophie, who nodded slowly and tried again. Over time, Sophie grew bolder, her movements becoming smoother and more confident. Watching her transformation filled Laura with pride. It reminded her of how far she'd come since her first day at the dojo. Jake, too, underwent a change, though it was subtler and slower. After his initial resentment faded, he began observing Laura more closely, noticing how effortlessly she connected with others. Her teaching style was patient yet firm, focusing on building confidence rather than tearing people down. It was a stark contrast to his own approach, which often relied on intimidation and competition. One afternoon, during a break between sparring sessions, Jake approached Laura hesitantly. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Laura replied, setting aside the towel she'd been using to wipe sweat from her face. "I've been thinking about what you said before. About earning respect instead of demanding it." He paused, searching for the right words. "Do you think maybe I could learn to teach like you do?" Laura blinked, surprised by his question. For a moment she didn't respond, considering how much this admission must have cost him. Finally she nodded. "Of course. Everyone starts somewhere, Jake, even teachers." He grinned sheepishly, relief washing over his features. "Thanks. I mean it." From that day forward, Jake began shadowing Laura during beginner classes, learning how to guide students without resorting to mockery or criticism. At first he stumbled, reverting to old habits whenever frustration bubbled up. But Laura stayed by his side, offering advice and encouragement until he found his footing. Together they created a supportive environment where everyone felt welcome to try their best. As weeks turned into months, the dojo transformed. The tension that had once divided the students gave way to camaraderie and mutual respect. Newcomers no longer feared being mocked. Instead, they looked forward to training alongside friends who cheered them on. Even Claire noticed the shift, remarking one evening how proud she was of how far everyone had come. Laura, meanwhile, continued refining her skills under Mia's guidance. Though she'd turned down Novatech's offer, she remained curious about the possibilities technology could bring to martial arts. With Mia's help, she explored ways to integrate advanced techniques into traditional practices, blending innovation with discipline. Their partnership became a testament to the power of collaboration, two women from different worlds united by a shared passion for growth and discovery. One Saturday morning, the dojo hosted its annual open house event, inviting members of the YAM community to experience Jiu Jitsu firsthand. Students of all levels demonstrated techniques, showcasing the progress they'd made over the year. Laura stood near the entrance, welcoming visitors and answering questions with a warm smile. Among the crowd was a familiar face, Mr. Carter from Novatech. He approached her casually, extending a hand. "Miss Laura," he said, his tone friendly. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by." "Not at all," she replied, shaking his hand. "It's nice to see you again. I wanted to thank You for inspiring us, Mr. Carter continued. Your decision to stay true to your values reminded us of why we created these technologies in the first place, to empower individuals, not overshadow them. Laura tilted her head, intrigued. What do you mean? We're shifting our focus, he explained. Instead of pursuing elite programs, we're exploring ways to make neural augmentation accessible to everyday athletes. People like you've shown us there's strength in simplicity. His words resonated deeply with Laura, filling her with a sense of purpose. Though she hadn't sought recognition, knowing her choices had influenced positive change brought her immense satisfaction. By the end of the day, dozens of newcomers had signed up for classes, eager to begin their own journeys. As Laura watched them leave, excitement gleaming in their eyes, she realized something profound. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to step onto the mat, to push past fear and self-doubt, and to embrace the endless potential within themselves. That night, as she walked home under a sky scattered with stars, Laura reflected on everything she'd achieved. She wasn't the same person who'd nervously entered the dojo months ago, unsure if she belonged. Now she stood tall, not because she'd beaten Jake or declined Novatek's offer, but because she'd discovered the truth about herself, that strength isn't measured by victories or accolades, but by the courage to keep moving forward. And so Laura's journey continued, not as a solitary path, but as part of a larger tapestry woven together by determination, kindness, and the unshakable belief that anyone can rise above their limits, one step at a time.